to everyone here from Talking Films Online, TFO for short. TFO was founded almost on a whim by Professor Nikhila and myself in June 2020 during the lockdown. Since then, TFO has had uninterrupted discussions on films from all over the world every Saturday at 9 p.m. on Zoom. It is a group of film scholars, researchers, students, teachers, and anyone passionate about cinema. It has been our practice to invite people to select and lead the discussion of the chosen film, which we watch in our own time and place. We have also held film festivals such as the East European, Iranian Art and Adur Gopal Krishnan. In the month of June each year, to celebrate our anniversary, we hold a smartphone short filmmaking contest for students and also organize a lecture series in collaboration with colleges and university departments. In this session, we discuss Amol Palekar's Hindi film, ANKAHEE. The discussion will be led by Soumitra Roy. Soumitra is an associate professor in English, Qazi Nazrul Islam Mahavidyalay, Churulia, West Bengal, as well as visiting faculty at several universities in Bengal. He has organized and collaborated in hosting several national and international seminars and has been widely published. He has recently co-edited a book titled Interrogating Eco-Literature and Sustainable Development. His areas of interest include post-colonial studies, film studies, and cultural studies. He has an active research interest in sports literature, including cricket literature, and is in the process of writing a book on cricket historiography and cultural transaction. This session is particularly special to all of us here. We are delighted to welcome two very special guests this evening, and they are the director of ANKAHEE, Amol Palekar, and the screenwriter, Kamlesh Pandey. We all know Amol Palekar as an esteemed actor, director, and producer of Hindi and Marathi cinema, but not all know that Palekar studied fine arts at the Sir J.J. School of Art, Bombay, and commenced his artistic career as a painter. He has had 7 solo exhibitions and participated in many group shows. He has been active in the avant-garde theatre in Marathi and Hindi as an actor, director, and producer since 1967. In his acting career, apart from several state awards, he has received the Filmfare Award for his role in Golmaal, the National Award for Carey in the category Best Film on Other Social Issues, Best Feature Film in Marathi for Bangarwadi, Best Feature Film in English for Quest, Special Jury Award for Daira, and for Kal Ka Aadmi in the category of Best Film on Family Welfare. He has also directed several television serials on the national network, such as Kachi Dhoop, Mrignayani, Nakab, and others. Kamlesh Pandey is a screenwriter with more than 30 years experience in advertising, 20 years in films, and 14 years in television. He won the Filmfare Awards for Tezab, Star Screen Award for Saudagar, and the IIFA Award for Rang De Basanti. He won the Best Copywriter of the Year award for 4 years in succession from its inception in 1978. He was awarded the most prestigious honor in the advertising industry, CAG Hall of Fame 2005. He is a member of Film Writers Association Mumbai, Indian Documentary Producers Association, and the Uttar Pradesh Film Development Council. He has been visiting faculty for teaching screenplay at Subhash Ghai's Whistling Woods. Pandey began writing for television in the 1980s while still in advertising full-time. He has written the cult investigative thriller Karamchand for Pankaj Parashar and social teleplays Kachi Dhoop and Nakab for Amol Palekar. We extend a hearty welcome to both of you and hope you enjoy the session. Over to you, Soumitra. But before that, it would be an omission on my part if I didn't make a special mention here of Soumitra's exemplary professionalism. He has honored his commitment to TFO by being present today, despite the tragic demise of his mother just 3 days ago. All of us here convey our heartfelt condolences to you, Soumitra. May your mother's soul transition in peace. Thank you very much for coming, and over to you.
So, I think that there is a problem, and Amol sir is wanting to say something. Amol sir? Sir, you have to unmute.
Please go ahead. No, please go ahead, Soumitra.
Okay. So, there are so many of layerings which are there, which we need to talk about. And when I watched the film for the first time, when it came out, I didn't understand quite the depth which is there in ANKAHEE, but it caught my attention that ANKAHEE is a film which has a sort of dialectic between, say, science and belief. That is the first thing that came to my mind. And therefore, for me, ANKAHEE represented the sort of inner conflict that human beings often undergo when we are in a state of trying to either look at our own selves and our beliefs and also think rationally. These are the points where we often come into conflict. That was the first thing. But I have also got to understand that now, as say, with the travel that I've had in my lifetime, and I'm no more young, when I look at the year 1985, when I look at the roster of films which were there are some very big budgeted movies. Came over that year. And then there was, I think, the highest grosser films of Marth, Gulami, Sunny Deol's Arjun, which are quite huge blockbuster. We had a plethora of films. Amol sir, you'll have to unmute, I suppose. Geeta, will you please tell?
No, go ahead, Soumitra.
Okay. So there were also these things which are there, these films which are there, which were Govind Nihalani's Aghat. Then Prakash Jha's Damul came out that year. Utpalanda Chakraborty's Dev Shishu was in the same year. J.P. Datta's Gulami. And Vidhu Vinod Chopra's debut film Khamosh. Mahesh Bhatt's Janam. Pradeep Krishan's Masi Sahib. Ashok Chopra's Nasu. Vijay Mehta's Rao Sahib, and Shyam Benegal's Trikal. So there are two ends of the spectrum in which we find in 1985. And in the midst of this comes ANKAHEE. I think that Amol sir was trying to perhaps say that it came out in 1984, perhaps because there are certain, in some sections I saw that 1984 is the year mentioned. But I think that whenever we log on, we find 1985 to be the year of credit. Now, the first thing that we need to talk about with ANKAHEE is the fact that ANKAHEE is about a family which actually is ruled over in terms of, 1984. So it's 1984. So, okay, then it means that we are looking at, I was perhaps looking at a year ahead. Okay. Anyways, we come through a specific period where certain different movies are coming through. I'll just stretch that a little bit for convenience sake. Okay. And then what happens is that it is in this movie, we find that it is the last word is about the patriarch played by Sriram Laghu, who is a very well-known astrologer. And whatever is his kahi is actually the honi. That is the start of that section. And the film begins with a sequence where a woman is being taken into an operation theater. She is the wife of the character played by Vidhu Vinod Chopra, who is an engineer, I think is an architect in the movie, okay, called Patvardhan. And Patvardhan's wife is going through an operation, and then it is an operation which is almost routine, because the doctor, played by the late Vinod Mehra, says that it's something which is very routine, and he does such operations almost thrice a week. Okay, so he doesn't foresee any difficulty in that operation. But just before that operation, what happens is that Sriram Lagu comes in and says that I can see her future, and the future is that she's going to die during this operation. And the doctor is a little bit distraught, is a little bit angry, but he goes in, and to everyone's grief, actually, the woman passes away during that operation, which therefore there is a stark sort of inevitability about the way Chaturvedi ji speaks, and the doctor is almost dumbfounded. Now, what catches her attention is post the operation, there is a sort of dialogue which takes place between the doctor and Chaturvedi. And what the doctor says is that if you are thinking about these astrological predictions and scientific thinking and the logic and temper, then why should we be thinking about these things? Because fate is something which is almost inscrutable. It is almost like a Greek tragic flavor. Okay, and this, you are talking about the Shastras, and you say that there is an Adha Uttar about it, half truth, which according to the doctor is more dangerous than a lie. Because with the half truth, what happens is that the person who is facing the Shastras and the question of the predictions, the person is almost on the defensive, almost feels that there is no way in which the person can actually fight what is going to happen to him or her in this life. So there is a definitive voice of anger and disrespect in the voice of the doctor, who says that your Chetavani, or warning, that astrology and the Shastras give with regard to fate, about what is foretold in the predictions, it doesn't talk about the whys and wherefores, which remain the unsolved mystery of astrology. And it is questioned. Okay, so if there is no pathway to mukti or salvation, what is the real reason behind, why should we at all be thinking about these things, about this mukti and all that? Okay, why should we be thinking about all this business about listening to the astrological predictions? So the doctor wants to make it a point that if we cultivate scientific temper, then there is every reason that human beings can fight out what is being foretold or what might be the premonitions. So fate hangs around our necks for everyone. But why should we take it for granted that whatever is being predicted, that will happen? Why should we give up everything even before it starts? So there is this anger in the doctor which comes through. And you'll find towards the end of the film that there is a connection with the last sequence with the same doctor coming through. I'll come to that towards the end of my discussion. Now, as the film rolls on, and we find that there is the introduction of Devika Mukherjee's character, who is called Sushma Chattopadhyay, a Bengali girl who is perhaps a media person, which I gathered from the film, who is the love interest in the life of the character Chandrakant Nandu Patvardhan, played by Amol sir. And over there, they are almost thinking about marriage. And Mrs. Chaturvedi is most happy about the fact that these two who have been on a relationship will be there for will get married. But at the moment when actually this marriage is to be fixed up, again, Chaturvedi comes in and says, I do not accept this relationship because this relationship is doomed. His prediction is that the first wife of Nandu will die on the 11th month of their marriage when she is about to give birth to a child. That stuns actually Nandu and Sushma. But over here we find one very important part, and that is I found that very fascinating, because Sushma, she is supposed to be shocked at this prediction. Okay, Nandu is shocked and he is almost left speechless. But Sushma stands up and says, I don't care about these predictions because I think that at least for 11 months, I'll be there in happiness with whom I love. Okay, and if I'm to die, then I'm to die, but at least I'll live the moment that I have control over. So it's a human endeavor to control the controllable and not think about the uncontrollable. That is something which stands out with Sushma's character when we look at that movie, that part where that prediction is made. And due course of time, actually, Sushma is almost, there is a consistent performance by or endeavor by Chaturvedi ji to try and dissuade Sushma from the marriage. He even goes to her office and tries to say that I do not want this marriage to take place. Why are you trying to commit suicide? He says. And Sushma again shows that calmness and says that I would rather wish to live on my love instead of trying to think about what might happen someday over which I cannot see. Yes, sir, please. Sir, please unmute. Kindly, sir.
You have to unmute.
Amol, sir, will please unmute and speak.
Who muted me?
No, it comes through automatically. Okay.
No, I just want to know why are we going through all this? Hasn't everybody seen the film?
There might be some people who have seen.
No,
I think we are wasting a lot of time.
Okay, I'll come back to it. Then I'll come back to it.
Creating the whole story and the characters and
okay, I'm coming to the main points.
And if I may say so, I thought there would be an interesting conversation, dialogue, and exchange of ideas.
Yeah, I'll just come to it in 5 minutes time, sir.
This is becoming more like Man Ki Baat.
Okay, sir. I'll just come back to the point where you want to come. Okay, I'll see to it.
I mean, there are so many things that one can talk about instead of giving the whole background. I mean, your background of the contemporary films at that time was very, very important, and it gave me a different perspective. But
I'll come to the point that you wanted to say.
Going through all the entire story and the characters and what
I'm
happens
not coming to the
there.
characters. Okay, sir. I'll just come back to the point that you're wanting to say. Okay, so I'll just cut short what I'm wanting to say, and I'll come to the main discussion part, which I can hold with Amol, sir. And I think that there are two things which I need to know from this film. One is, when we try to discuss this film, the main theme is, of course, I think that there is this kashmakash between scientific temper, predictions, and some sort of helplessness that human beings feel when we go through astrology, which you are trying to counter along with the point that scientific temper needs to be cultivated. Okay, so we need to think about what is happening in our hands today instead of surrendering ourselves to tomorrow. I think that is the first point that you have tried to convey, if I'm not very wrong, sir. So there is as someone was trying to say, the exploitation of a helpless being. I think that you would wish to explicate on that, if we may come down to that. Can I have a feedback from you, sir, regarding that? What made you feel? Okay. Yes, sir.
The word that you are trying to not use, a simple word called faith or blind faith.
Yes, sir.
You are avoiding using that. So let me come in front and use that word. It is the scientific temper versus blind faith. As plain and simple. And
yes, sir.
My position as a filmmaker was also very clear that I do not want to perpetuate the blind faith. Just to, I mean, when you're talking about it, it is very interesting that we just have gone on the moon. And along with that, we saw so many visuals of so many pujas being held all over the country and whatnot. I mean, as if those scientists had no role to play. It was because of those pujas and havans and all that we reached the moon. I mean, that was the kind of show which I very strongly oppose. As an educated, thinking person, I very strongly oppose. And that's what I tried to bring out through this film. There is one more interesting point which I must, most of you don't know. This is based on a Marathi play called Kalaya Tasmai Namaha.
C.T. Khanolkar.
Yes, C.T. Khanolkar, a very celebrity playwright and a brilliant play written. He was also a outstanding poet. But in this play, I distinctly remember that the play was completely scientific temperament. And I, as a director, I chose to make changes in that original script. And therefore, as you said, Devika's character, Sushma's character, the end soliloquy, which was so beautifully written by Kamlesh, where she makes it clear that I am dying not because it is written in my destiny. It is my choice as my protest against all this, and where Nandu has to take the blame. I think there is a very, very clear-cut point of view of a director.
Okay. Next thing that I want to know from you, sir, is that when you, with the ending which you made with Devika's character dying and Deeptiji's character being alive, so that ANKAHEE part, because just prior to the sequence where the character of Deeptiji gives the delivery to the child, there is this almost this prayer from Sri Ram Lagu who says, "Kahi ko ANKAHEE kar de." There is the sort of, there's almost a prayer. And along with it, that sequence of the song which takes place, sung by Bhimsen Joshi ji, okay, which Anil Chatterjee's character sings, which is almost a celebration of the life that Indumati goes through, that transformation that Indumati goes through. Did you consider, in a sense, that Devika Mukherjee's character, or that means Sushma Chattopadhyay's character, was to be the first wife's character in effect, in spirit, and therefore actually the Kahi in a way is met, although the actual character of the wife.
All this is a very typical kind of the arguments which we all tend to give ourselves to justify our faith, to justify our what can I say, wrong beliefs, and therefore then we go on saying, "नहीं, but वो उनकी उन्होंने जो कहा था वो तो सच ही हो गया ना," kind of a thing.
It's a sad thing if that happens. So there is a protest through that letter, but there is almost a prayer also from the character of Chaturvedi ji that please, whatever I have seen today, whichever I have predicted till date, I don't want this prediction to come true in my case, in my family's case.
No, which has nothing. I mean, which is probably as a senior person, it is his anguish, but he has no means to correct what he has predicted. So let's not go let's not go give too much of weightage to all those things, which are very uh, easy for us to digest. And we like to believe in all these things so that we can put a blame on somebody else or something called destiny. That's how we keep on going.
Yes. Yeah, I too thought the end of the film was very interesting, like you just mentioned, Amol Palekar, especially because it's almost like an existentialist act that, Sushma performs in her suicide. It is, well thought out and acted upon as a demonstration of free will and as defiance of Nandu's father's lifelong commitment to astrology. And what is important is he justifies his astrology by using again a category of science when he says it is mathematics. So that I found was very interesting. And it's also interesting that you make the character of Sushma an astronomer, again related to the stars, but but she is working in the domain of a recognized science, whereas astrology is not.
Astrology versus astronomy.
Yeah, whereas astrology is not. So I thought that kind of a positioning of your characters was very interesting. But what I wanted to ask you was it difficult to rope in Dr. Sriram Lagu to play this role? Because in real life, he has always been an ardent campaigner against superstition and has advocated rationalism and scientific temper.
Yes. But it wasn't difficult because Dr. Lagu, as an actor, at that time was ready to do any role which came his way. And he was also, of course, quite fond of me because we came from the same theater background. We were doing plays together. So there was no way that he would have said no. But his rational thinking and all those stands which he took later on hadn't happened at that time. So it wasn't difficult at all.
Okay.
Just one more point. Geeta, just one.
I think we will now open out for discussion.
Geeta,
and
just one more.
To you, Soumitra.
Okay, just 1 minute more. I just want to ask that when we are going through the transition of Indumati, okay, from that girl who is supposed to be a little bit mentally, she's a victim of hysteria, as the doctor says. Then why do you use her brain scans during those sequences? Because there is nothing wrong as such medically with her in terms of the formation of her brain. What is difficult with her is perhaps a personality development, and that is passed up as Pagalpanti by her father. Okay, she's disturbed by loud noise. She's disturbed by that the hard rock music which plays in one sequence where Nandu's character goes out for the bath and plays that music loud, initially by the phone call. Is this sort of, does it tally? I mean, that looking into her brain and taking all those scans and then looking at her behavior.
Isn't that how we are supposed to check medically? Isn't that how one should? What is the reason for hysteria? Is there any medical reason? Is there any damage to the brain? Is there any cause, etc., etc.? So scientifically, you go ahead and rule out
look at the behavior.
So
look at the behavior pattern.
Kamlesh Pandey.
Behavior pattern is something different.
Yeah, Kamlesh
going through the medical tests to make sure that there is nothing wrong. And then one may go into the psychological treatment.
Psychological.
But before we go to psychological treatment, it is necessary to rule out scientifically, medically, that there is nothing else wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. Kamlesh Pandey, would you like to tell us something about the challenges you must have faced while writing a script of this nature?
For me, it was not really a challenge because it was my first film anyway. And Amol being a friend, he just offered me my first Hindi film and my entry into Hindi feature film industry in a way. So I will always be really grateful to Amol for that. But what excited me was basically this whole debate angle between astronomy and astrology, between scientific temper and superstition. And that's why the whole film almost became a debate. In fact, the girl in the play was doing something else. But in the film, we made the girl an astronomer and located her at the Nehru Center. So in fact, we have a whole scene shot at Nehru Center between Amol's, between Nandu and Shushma, which again is on the same issue. How can these stars and the planets so far away from our lives, how can they influence our destiny? How can they influence our decision and what happens to our lives? So yes, I think it was a great opportunity. In fact, I remember that after the film was released and Gul Anand, who was a producer, he saw the film for distribution. He didn't take the film for distribution, but he rang me up in my office. Look, I saw your film and I like your work, what you have done with the dialogue. And I have a film for you. And he offered me Jalwa. So actually, he started me on a journey which is still continuing. And that's why ANKAHEE has a very special place in my heart. Not only because I wrote the dialogue and so on, and we try to do a rather sort of old-fashioned drama or play into a very, very contemporary modern story, and almost do a debate between astronomy and astrology, which was never done before on Indian screen ever. This was perhaps the first time that so openly the debate between astrology and astronomy. And not only that, the best part is, and I think that is something Amol and I should get the credit, that people of both kinds, people who have scientific temper, they enjoyed the film because, of course, the father was really proved wrong. And the people who believe in astrology, they also liked the film. Of course, it was right. His words proved right because the girl committed suicide. So anyway, she died. So his words came true. So very funnily, the divided audience between scientific temper and superstition, they both got their own takeout to suit their own decision, own mindset, to suit their own convenience, because people do not really change their views so easily. And I don't think a film can change views so easily as, but it does underline the fact of the debate, which still the debate continues. Amol very rightly, she showed that even with the moon launch, moon landing, people were doing hamans and puja and worship and all that. I mean, in this country, when we buy a laptop or a computer, we put a swastik mark on the screen first. And somebody was telling me, when we launch a rocket, we break a coconut. So we are a strange country who can somehow try to embrace both viewpoints, astronomy as well as astrology. Okay, there is something beyond your control, something which you may call destiny. And there is something you can control, you can analyze, you can understand. And both are going to exist no matter what we say and what we do in our movies. Both views are going to remain in the people.
Right. Thank you so much. I think now we will open out the discussion. There are lots of comments in the chat box. People may want to come in. Yes, Nikhila, would you like to say something about the film?
Yeah, I would like to come in at this point. So thanks very much, Soumitra, for the responses, and Amol Palekar and Kamlesh Pandey. Thank you very much, for responding to our queries. There is a whole parallel conversation that is happening in the chat box. I'm sure you're following the discussion, but I just want to respond to this film in the way I saw it. In a way, this film is also set up, like many of our films, as a triangular love story. But I found it pushing the envelope in many ways. For instance, in the usual mass commercial, triangular love story, the hero is the moral and ethical center. So his choice of the two women in his lives, in some ways, are meant to redeem him. So one of them sometimes may conveniently kind of disappear. She may very often die. If she lives on, then it is the hero has probably chosen, someone whom he ennobles through his choice. A village girl or a girl, as in this case, a girl who is mentally challenged. So whatever be his choice, it is meant to be ennobling the hero's character. Now, in this film, what I found very different, and remember, we are watching this film, more than 2-3 decades after its release. When we go back to look at this film, I was completely taken up by the way in which the hero, as the moral and ethical center of the film, is hollowed out. I mean, it is not him at all. The story is not about him. Even if he has, some sense of anguish and some guilt, the audience is not meant to empathize with him at all, or even empathize with his sense of guilt. Instead, I thought the character of Sushma was, quite remarkable. I found myself involuntarily hooting at some of the dialogues given to her, and probably Kamlesh Pandey ji is responsible for some of those. I thought, wow, look at this character saying the kind of things that she's saying. And what was very interesting for me is that it's not set up as a vacuous religion versus science kind of debate. She's mostly agnostic. It doesn't seem like she's completely disavowing the prediction, that is Sushma. But also the suicide note at the end, which is really not so much a defeat, but the terms in which she wants to lead her life. So she says she has been reduced to a situation of choicelessness. Nobody asked her for her choices. She's been reduced to a situation of choicelessness. So through the act of death, she says, I want to reclaim my choice. So again, I thought that was, so here is this film cultivating her as the ethical center. So for me, I was also reading some of the reviews, and they're all very, very positive about Deepti Nawal's character. For a change, it was not Deepti Nawal I was rooting for in this film. It was Sushma. It's an amazing character to go back, and watch this film. And Soumitra, thanks to you, I had not watched this film. Really, we've watched some amazing films in the last few years on TFO, including Amol Palekar. You'll be interested to know we just had a discussion of Mati Mai. So we watched some of these amazing films, revisited these films, and in today's context, they make so much more sense than probably they did to their contemporary audience. Thanks, Geeta, for letting me speak. There are lots of people I know.
Just to add to what Nikhila said, I think, in a proleptic manner, the film is also predicting today's, temper, where this kind of faith in astrology, etc., and unscientific things is legitimized, and through institutionalizing astrology as a discipline in certain universities and things of that kind. So although the film on the face of it appears regressive, in its own way, it also seems to be predicting the future when it was made in 84. I think Nikita Mittal has raised her hand. Nikita, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, ma'am, to allow me to speak. Hello, Amol sir. Actually, I'm a PhD scholar, and I'm trying to work on your character only, the way you used to present your characters, and the types of masculinity that was presented by you. Because we see that during that era, 1970s, 1980s, violent movies were more popular on screen as projected by Amitabh Bachchan. So I want to know that what was the conditions at that time that actually led to these changes, and what were your thoughts when you represented your characters in a completely contrasting manner to that of Amitabh Bachchan? Because I'm working on masculinity studies, so these things are very important for me to know. Though it is not related to this movie ANKAHEE, but it's a general question.
It is very much related to this film also. If you, as was pointed out a bit earlier, rightly pointed out, the character of Nandu is so spineless, which a hero is not supposed to be. So, in no way the traditional hero, whether it is the angry young man of Amitabh Bachchan or the romantic hero of Rajesh Khanna, or all those my contemporaries, you must see that Amol Palekar was so different. And particularly, if you look at the films where I portrayed the character with gray shades, take an example of Garonda. What kind of a man is he who tells his girlfriend, "Okay, the boss is interested in you, so go ahead and marry with him. We'll continue to have our affair. And once he dies, then everything will come to you." I mean, is that how a hero behaves? No. So, and then I have always, apart from being a boy next door, which was the label given to me.
Yes.
In that boy next door, I always, if you see my varied performances, you can see that I have tried to find the gray shades of that boy next door, because that's the more of a reality and not something larger than life, which a hero is supposed to be. I never played a larger than life hero, and therefore a perfect man who can do nothing wrong and fights against all the evil and wins single-handed. That is how our hero is supposed to be. But the characters which I portrayed, I always tried to find the gray shades in that. Like even in ANKAHEE, it is Nandu who is not ready to take a stand, who doesn't have the courage, doesn't have the guts to question his father, doesn't say that up yours, I don't care about your predictions and all. I am going to marry this girl and I don't believe in all this hocus pocus. He doesn't say. So as a director, I had to bring out that point of view through Sushma. And I mean, that was a big challenge for us. And I think we were very happy to come out successfully.
But sir, like following this same argument, your characters actually like represented the common man on screen, because that was the era. Being perfect was something that is not possible in our human life. So I think your characters portrayed the reality, and at the same time, I think they were also giving this kind of solace to the people that okay, our hero is just not like Amitabh Bachchan. Our hero could be like this like Amol Palekar as well. No, even if in ANKAHEE you said that the hero was spineless, but what about the heroes in Chitchor or this Golmaal, your other movies?
They are also not something larger than life.
Hmm.
They are the common man who fumble, I mean, you to talk about Rajnigandha, the very first film that gave birth to Amol Palekar. Here is a man who's least interested in his girlfriend, who keeps talking about his office politics, and he's always late, doesn't utter "I love you" even once in the film. Now that is the common man. That is the man with who's not larger than life, who is so perfect as our hero is always supposed to. So I have always portrayed characters which are vulnerable, which are ready to fumble, stumble, fall down. Choti si baat. A guy who doesn't have the courage, as I follow Vidya Sinha, and the moment she turns, I turn and cross the road and go away. Now, what kind of a man is he? So, but he wants to better himself. And that wanting to do away with wrong things is the crux of, I think, all my trying to do whatever I try to bring through my characters.
Thank you. Gautam has raised his hand. Gautam, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
First of all, let me tell you, sir, I'm a big fan of your work. I grew up watching your film. I mean, I'm one of those 90s kids still familiar with video cassettes.
Sorry, which film did you say?
No, most of your films in the 80s, Golmaal and Choti Si Choti Baat and Chicho. And I was like those kids who familiar with video cassettes. Coming back to it's not even a question, like it's just a comment if I could make, and I wish, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. What I felt was ANKAHEE visually depicts the slippery bridge that connects the tangible and the uncanny. And this visual depiction is so fascinating. And I guess filmmaker William Friedkin achieved this perfectly, more or less perfectly in his film Exorcist. That's what I felt. And ANKAHEE handles this mysterious entity between fate versus free will and destiny versus the loss of science. And the film also reminded me personally, maybe I'm subjective, this is my subjective opinion, of Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men, which dwelt upon similar conflicts, but differently, of course. And this scuffle, I feel, whether it's west or east, is constant. So what drove you to create this ambiguous nature of the mysterious life in the visual form? I mean, it's a challenge trying to communicate the incommunicable. So
have you just joined in, or you have been with us throughout?
I was with you guys throughout, but in between there was some network issues, so I was
because that's why you are asking something which we have already discussed and
okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
okay, so
we can move on to Meenakshi, who has also raised her hand. Meenakshi Puri.
Yes, I have a question.
Raised your hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
my
Meenakshi.
question is, if the idea was to show
We can't hear you, Meenakshi.
I am speaking.
I can hear you.
Yeah,
I can hear her.
Okay, so if the idea was to show a man who was spineless, almost evil, to take advantage of a mentally challenged woman, do you not let him off very easily when you have Deepti Naval say that, she doesn't challenge him, she doesn't question him ever. All she mumbles, and this is not expected from Deepti Naval at least. She mumbles these words to Sushma where she says, my role as a bahu and as a wife have been fulfilled. I mean, she's gushing about the position she is in. She's been cured. Why does she not expose the ugliness of the hero, of her husband, and the rest of the family? Everybody's taken advantage of her.
Of course. And that's why I said that he's a spineless character. As far as Deepti's character goes, she doesn't know that he has married so that she would die. She doesn't know that. So why would she? She is very happy. There is no contradiction in that. It is
But
this.
I thought when she went to Sushma, when she goes to Sushma's house, she's aware that, there was this period, 1 year period or 11-year periods where she was now made the Balika Bakra.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Sir,
I haven't seen the film recently, but I don't think there is any, that Dipti's character is aware of how Nandu has used her as a bait.
Can I just interject for 1 second, please?
Yes.
Yeah, Soumitra.
I think that prior to when this character is pregnant, I think there is one sequence where actually Nandu comes to Indu and says, "The shadi to," after that sequence where there is the exchange of the ice creams and all that, and the shopping sequence. I think Nandu goes back to Indu and says, "Shadi actually to honi thi Sushma se." तो बीच में तुम ये prediction था, and then says all those things, but तुझको अभी जीना है. I think that is when actually Indu comes to know that actually she has been used. That is the point. And then she goes back to Sushma and says, when she goes in that very heavily pregnant state, she goes back to Sushma and says, जो तुम लोगों को पता था वो मुझको भी अभी पता है. I think that is one sequence. These are the two places actually where Nandu confesses, first of all, that he has used Indu in a way, and Indu takes in that she's very brave and goes and tells Sri Ram Lagu's character that I am not unhappy about what has happened because I've had very fulfilling 11 months, and then goes to Sushma and says that I know what was happening. You have to take care of my child. I think there are the
Yes, you're right. Yeah. She is aware. She is aware. Yes.
Oh, okay. As I said, I haven't seen the film for so many years, so my memory is not as sharp as all of you are. But I mean, what was your question? That Nandu ko, what you wanted me to do with Nandu?
Meenakshi, are you there?
Yeah, I think he was let off very easily. Deepti
Nandu.
Naval does not expose his villainy. She doesn't get angry with him. Nobody
But
seems to be
Deepti-
angry with him,
Deepti's-
not even Sushma.
Deepti's character, she's a girl from village. She has been brought up in a certain setup and certain way. How do you expect her to behave like Sushma? She can't.
What I think is that even no matter what circumstances you come from, there's a certain rage at exploitation which we are aware of. You could be the uneducated and the illiterate surely know in their bones when they are being exploited.
That's what Deepti's character is. Indu is an uneducated, coming from a small town, if not a village, small town, and been brought up in all traditional manners where the woman's role is supposed to be secondary. She has been brought up like that. So there is no way that she will raise a question. It is actually, now that you point out, I think Nandu should have been punished little more harshly, which as a filmmaker at that time, had I known that, yes, I would have done that. Today, if I have to remake ANKAHEE, I will make Nandu as a outright villain and criticize him openly and make him pay for whatever wrong he has done.
Sonia has raised her hand. Sonia Bhaskar. Please
Um,
go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity. I actually had a doubt. We in the film see how Dr. Sriram Lagu's character kind of goes and talks to Sushma, tries to dissuade her. We somehow don't see the father and the son having a conversation, not even when the son decides to marry Deepti Naval's character. Was there a conscious decision on why we don't see Dr. Sriram Lagu more active as a father when a decision was being taken of Nandu marrying Indu?
As I said, you must all understand that the problem I had was I was making a film based on a play. So the basic storyline and the script was already there. Now the changes as a director, which I wanted to make, and I went on making with Kamlesh's help and all of my crew members, that was unfortunately very limited. If I had to change the entire story, then why make a film based on the play would be a question, rightly to me myself. So I had taken the story, basic storyline of the play and made relevant changes, which मुझे खुद को अखरते थे, which I was not happy with in the play, in the original storyline. I went on, but I did not. But talking about Dr. Lagu's character, Dr. Lagu's character is something like on a pedestal. He has no dialogue with his family members. Where does he talk to his wife? Heart-to-heart talk. Where does he talk to his son? Heart-to-heart. No, he doesn't. So he is at a different level. He considers himself above the lesser mortals, as one can see. So Dr. Lagu, the character Jyotir Bhaskar, couldn't possibly go and have actually he should have fired Nandu when he takes a decision to marry. He should have put a stop. That was the logical end. The whole thing wouldn't have happened later. Isn't it?
Thank you. Mansi has a question. Please go ahead.
It's a comment about the
Yeah,
discussion
please.
that we are just having. I feel that because Indu was a mentally disabled girl, she was seen as a dispensable entity. That, one could just use a disabled character in, concocting a plan of one's marriage. So Indu was basically used as, by Nandu.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So along with her location from being a girl from village, she was also a disabled girl, which was
I
later
wouldn't say
shown as
disabled,
cute.
but not very nicely grown.
Right.
Rajan has also raised his hand. Rajan, please go ahead with your comment. Rajan Barrett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that what happens is something very interesting, because you plan one thing and another thing happens, right? And the idea of this fixed idea of astrology and astronomy, that is negated. The plan is negated, and this kind of anti-hero that Nandu is something that's brilliant in as much as I don't think I've seen many films like this, right? And that takes me to Tennessee Williams, who is very famous for in his plays getting this anti-hero character, a deeply flawed character. But Nandu is not really a deeply flawed character, but he's an anti-hero in some ways, right? So I think that it goes back to talking about Hamlet, when he says what happens when our plans fail, and also what we talk about when we talk about modern psychology, right, and having a plan neurosis, right? So that's something else that we see in this film, and that's all that I'll say. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else would like to come in now with a comment or a question? Anyone?
Can I ask something to Kamlesh ji, please?
Okay.
Kamlesh ji, when you wrote this script, how much were you hampered actually by the original play? How did you tackle those dimensions of the original play? I haven't read the original play, I must confess. But when you rewrote this, how much were you hampered?
I like the story basically, but not the play. I'm sorry to say that. I like the story a bit, but not the play, because
in fact, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt before Kamlesh says something? See, it was very nice of Kamlesh to say that it wasn't difficult. I think I had put him in a terrible situation because my co-producer had already written a script and with at all, which was very faithful to the play and very, what should I say, non-interesting. So that's why I approached Kamlesh and I gave him that script and said, this is what I don't like. And I want you to now start working on this bad script. This is how. So it was not only, but I think because it was Kamlesh's first film, I could bully around him. And
no,
but it was a very difficult situation.
Amol is right in a way, because this screenplay that was given to me was a little too loyal to the stage play that was written, Kalai Tasmai Nama, and it was boring. It had no humor. So one of the things that I tried to do was bring in some humor through Nandu and his mother, and also the romance between Nandu and Sushma, for example, had to be underlined in a very, very subtle way, because while the main story was simply a debate, who's right and who's wrong, astronomer or astrologer and so on. But the script lacked the drama. The script didn't have anything of that debate that I wanted to introduce in. In fact, the whole idea that let us keep Sushma as an astronomer working at Nehru Center. So in the Nehru Center, she plays with the stars and the planets, the same elements which the father tries to use against people in a way. The same elements which are used by father to exploit people, for example, let's say, with their blind belief and all that, the same elements are used by this girl to educate people about the universe, And that was a huge gap, huge difference. That was a huge leap of faith from that old script to the new script. So in a way, it was not all that difficult because it came from the heart, and also because this is something that I too believed in. We don't need to depend on these kind of astrological predictions, because unless you decide to do what you want to do with your destiny, nothing is going to happen. You can't depend on other planets and other stars to decide your destiny. You have to do it yourself. So it was something that I too believed in and Amol too believed in, and we tried to put in our our views into the screenplay, into the dialogues. The most difficult part was writing the ending, the so-called suicide note. If you notice it, it is not a suicide note, it is a statement. And the girl says, Sushma says, ye meri atmahatya nahi, mera bayan hai. That is a statement she's making. She's not saying that I'm committing suicide. She's very clear about it. She says this is a statement she's making, and statement against astrology, against blind belief, against all those things that, who are exploiting people. So the last piece in the film was the most difficult piece to write, because one has to be very well balanced. Okay, we are trying to justify something which is unjustifiable. You can't justify suicide any way you want. There's no way you can justify suicide. And here this heroine of your film, the leading lady of your heroine, is going to commit suicide. So how do you justify her statement? So I had to make it very clear in the dialogue that ye meri atmahatya nahi, mera bayan hai. So I mean, we have to take those liberties to make our points. Yeah.
I think that we talked about the choicelessness.
I think let's move. We have more people. We'll come back to you. Jyotirmoy, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Geeta. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, it's a privilege for me to be here tonight, to be on live with a personality like Amol Palekar. His films and the songs of his films, actually, we grew up with. And actually, I would like to get some observations from Amol Palekar. Also, I would like to ask another question to Kamlesh Pandey, sir.
Yeah.
Firstly, that of course, this film we have talked about this film. What I was thinking about now, the character of cinema domain in India has changed quite a bit in recent times. I have seen. One is, of course, when it comes to national awards. Of course, a film like ANKAHEE also won national awards, and there were a time when national awards were being won by a certain kind of film. And in that domain also, we have seen quite a dominant presence of regional cinema when it comes to national films, and we used to know more about those films through these national awards and this kind of recognitions. In recent times, what we have seen is that regional cinema is not making a kind of a cut that it used to be. Cinema is to come from, of course, many states from South India, also Bengal, even Orissa, even from my state, Assam. Now, what we see, even when it comes to national awards and this kind of recognitions, cinema has become very mainstream. Like the mainstream, mostly which are the so-called super hit films from Bollywood. They are everywhere. They are in the box offices. They are also in national cinema and national awards. And there we see a kind of a very distinct kind of marginalization of the kind of cinema that ANKAHEE belongs to, maybe the alternative cinema or even regional cinema. And more importantly, also we do not see the kind of movement that started as alternative cinema is no longer there as it is. So what would be your take if you are still around?
To begin with, I really don't understand the national awards completely. Not at all. I do not know what is their standard by which they judge certain films and so on and decide to give awards to X, Y, Z and not A, B, C, for example. So I really have no idea, no access to that. The only experience I have was I was once in Oscar committee, to choose Oscar entry for Oscar awards, India's entry for Oscar awards. And what was happening there, it shocked me so much that I refused to be part of on any committee, any jury, either for National Award or for Oscar Committee Awards, because the people who sit down to judge, if you look at their filmography and what they have done and what they stand for, you are surprised and sometimes even shocked. So honestly, I really have no idea how the national awards are judged and on what level, what quality, what kind of cinema, for example, they want to promote in the first place, and what is the so-called Indian cinema. If, for example, if there is a word called Indian cinema, which the national awards are supposed to promote and encourage, what exactly is this so-called Indian cinema in the first place? Is it the mainstream, what they call, stupidly called Bollywood? Or is it the regional cinema or the so-called art cinema, which only is made for foreign film festivals? Where is the Indian cinema? So I think because there is no specific definition of Indian cinema, so to say, or Bharatiya cinema, the Hindi cinema or Hindi feature film, the what you call is, what is called stupidly Bollywood, is replacing it. But I do not agree that Bollywood defines Indian cinema completely. No, Bollywood does not define Indian cinema. No way. No way. It may occasionally include some elements of Indian culture, Indian values, Indian ideals, Indian ethos, all those elements. But they are only derivative. There's no very conscious effort to try to tell a story or India's story in the first place. Who is telling India's story today? No one. I'm sorry to say it, but today no one is telling India's story. No one even has a clue, okay, what India is all about, where India is going, how India is going, and what is there in the future. So I don't think I'm the right person to answer that question. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, Ajanta Sarkar has a comment to make. Ajanta, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, sir. So for me too, it's a great honor to be in on this conversation. And I think I'm a very small person, but I want to ask you something anyway, which is that I actually teach in an engineering college, sir. And this coexistence of faith and reason is something that I encounter every day. And you are also a really fearless public intellectual, and I admire you very, very much. So perhaps you would be the best person to kind of, speak on this more. I actually could almost predict the ending without having seen it, just because I know your lineage and, I knew that that was going to happen. Also, incidentally, so yesterday, we had the director of the Chandrayaan mission at VIT. There have also been a lot of controversies because the scientists themselves say, we pray. And I'm asking you this question because the Nehruvian idea of secularism was also heavily class biased. And, I like reading, first of all, I like reading Sigmund Freud, who tells us that unreason is housed in reason. So I did find problematic your portrayal of hysteria, etc. But more important than that, I think rationalism or a certain view of secular India works for, I don't know how to say us, when we also talk of parallel cinema, but the world of the popular is deeply a kind of mongrel world. And I'm wondering if we need to rethink our vocabularies, because clearly this is also happening in the US, of the rise of really right-wing Christianity. Clearly this is happening in Iran, while we have the James Webb. So you have thought about these questions very, and I was just thinking of the film Oppenheimer, reason as an iron cage. So there are so many complex questions that were running through my mind. And I'm just really grateful to have the opportunity to ask you those. Thank you.
Are you asking or are you asking?
Can I?
Yes,
Kamlesh, sorry.
Yes, Amol Palekar, please come.
I think the questions related to ANKAHEE are over, and we are talking about now Indian cinema and etc., which is fine. Kamlesh can go ahead and participate. I would like to opt out and say bye-bye to everybody.
Oh, but I think Ajanta was asking you a question, sir.
I think we should answer.
No, she's talking about Oppenheimer and Iranian cinema and all that. I didn't hear any question related to ANKAHEE.
I think Gautam then has a question on ANKAHEE. Gautam, would you like to ask your question quickly?
Yeah, sorry, sir. This would be my last question. And the despair and
Sorry,
loveless.
but you
Excuse me,
can
sir.
you can go ahead with the discussion. I have no problem with that. You can go ahead with the discussion. I'll only opt out, saying thank you so much and good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you very much.
So, I mean, I wanted to ask this question to writer Pandey sir as well. If I could go ahead, that's fine.
Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, sir. The despair and loveless life lead the protagonist Nandu to a zombie-like state, and out of this arises hate, and out of that hate, he makes love to his wife, and she carries his seed of hatred, which has a life of its own. And you have so perfectly captured, written these paradoxes, and it has been reflected so eloquently on the screen as well. And even the soliloquy of Nandu before this scene is he's so eloquent, and even the ending is such a paradox. So I was just wondering if you could comment on that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your question. What exactly is the question?
The question is the despair. Out of despair, Nandu makes love to his wife, and before that scene, he just breaks down with his with his ex-girlfriend, and he says, "I have this hatred, nafrat." That's the word he uses. Yeah. And then in the very next scene, the consummation, or call it a first act of making love, happens, and there is, yeah.
I get it. No, it's very simple. Basically, Nandu is a very real character. He's not an ideal character. Please, there are two kinds of heroes in movies, as per I understand. One is you look up to the kind of people you look up to, like Amitabh Bachchan and XYZ, all those other gang. And then, of course, there are heroes you identify with.
Yes, true.
This person is full of flaws.
Yeah.
He is human. He has guilt sometimes, and sometimes he gets obsessed with what he wants to do.
Yeah.
Maybe he's very greedy. Maybe he has got his own agenda to fulfill and so on. So you can't help him. You can't, because we all have our own baggage. We all have our own mindset, which comes from our education, our family, our environment, our country, our culture, and so on and so forth. And we try to read every film with that mindset.
True.
Where we have already fixed, who is going to be what, who should be what, and who should avoid being what. We already have our heroes and villains in our mind, and we try to transpose them into the movies that we see, which may not happen all the time. What you think may be right in a story or in a film may be wrong, and what may be right in a film or a story may be wrong for you as per your personal views. So basically, he's being human. We wanted to keep him very human. He has guilt. He has moments of guilt. He knows what he's doing, and yet there is something else inside me who's driving him, and that is something that most people have missed out on. His desire for Sushma. For the sake of his desire for Sushma, he's ready to commit anything, any heinous crime. He's a lover. Don't forget that. It's a love story too. It's a love story where, for the sake of love of one girl, this man decides to sacrifice another girl. It is his idea of love. So in a way, yes, he is negative character. You can call him a villain, but he is doing everything for the sake of love, for this girl with Sushma that he has. He needs it. He wants her. He loves her. And for that, he can go to any extent, any extreme, even trying to get someone killed for that matter. So it is basically trying to keep him human, which is what we wanted.
There is a Vasundhara Gautam who has raised her hand.
Yeah.
Vasundhara.
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. So I have this question. We started with scientific temperament and, faith and all those things. And then in the middle of this conversation, at one place you said that ye mera bayan hai. So I just want to understand that ये जो बयान सुषमा ने मर के दिया वो जिंदा रह के उसे ज्यादा फोर्सफुली दे सकती थी. So why did you eliminate a character like Shushma in the end? Why didn't you allow her to live? Because if you would have allowed her to live, the point that in fact Amol sir was trying to make when he talked about scientific temperament would have come out more forcefully.
Okay. See, I'll tell you what normally happens. A story has its own limitations, its own journey to follow. And once the story is complete, okay, and once a story reaches a certain destination, you can't change the direction. The way we had conceived Sushma, in fact, even her last bayan, in fact, I had to try very hard to justify her suicide because suicide was going to be inevitable, which was in the play. Suicide was going to be inevitable anyway. And because we were adopting the famous play, we couldn't get away from that. That suicide has to be there because it was there in the play and we were adopting that play. Everybody knew about it. Now, how to justify the suicide? So I didn't want to make it like a suicide. I still wanted to give her the image of a heroine, a brave woman. Actually, she dies like a brave woman. And that is why she said, "It's mera bayan hai." It is not my suicide note. Sorry. If you are taking this as a suicide note, you are wrong. This is my statement on the face of this entire universe who believes in astrology, who believes in blind faith, who believes that certain stars and the planets, they govern your destiny. It is my statement against the entire universe of people who believe in this blind faith. So that's why it's called a bayan, which makes him more, it makes her more of a heroine. Because just imagine, for the sake of argument, as you were saying, if I should have tried to keep her alive, what would have happened? I mean, hypothetically, what would have happened? Would she have been able to marry Nandu? No way. Nandu was already married. He already had Dipti Naval. He already had a baby with her. There was no future. There was no future for her relationship with Nandu. What else could he have done? Went on with the job at the Nehru Center as an astronomer and so on. That would have been a very loose ending. In movies, we are somehow handicapped with this whole, in the ending, in the climax, you must have something that either uplifts people or it shocks people. So her suicide is a kind of shock that we wanted to give to the audience so that they wake up to this whole idea, look, between astrology and astronomy, between scientific temper and superstition, you should choose scientific temper. That is what you should choose. And that is what comes across her last statement, her bayan, at the end of it. So for me...
But the one who chooses scientific temperament is the one who dies in the end, eventually.
Yes.
In fact, if she would have gotten married to somebody
because you could easily say, why Devdas should have died in the end or drunken himself to death. Why? He didn't have to. He was a handsome guy who could have lived very well and got married to Chandramukhi and had fun all his rest of his life. No. In movies, for example, in stories, for example, the death of a leading character means a lot. In fact, for a long time, it was assumed that unless Dilip Kumar dies in the end of a movie, the movie is not going to be a hit or not going to be very popular. People expect leading men to die so that they remain heroes or heroines after the film is released. People are not looking for ideal solutions, please. Let me make it very clear. In a story, or for example, especially in a story for a film, People are not looking for ideal solutions. Okay, what is right ultimately and what is wrong ultimately. But they want to enjoy a story. They want to share something. Okay, there is something in the story. There may be something for me. But they're not looking for ideals and ideal endings and ideal characters. They're looking for real characters, people who are spineless, people who do commit suicide. They're looking for all kind of people, because that is what makes them identifiable. Yes, a girl who is basically an astronomer, and she is a Nehru working as Nehru Center, surrounded with the stars and the planets. She can choose to decide and commit suicide. Why do so many doctors commit suicide? Why do so many doctors commit suicide? Don't they know about death? Why do many successful people commit suicide? Why so many famous film stars who have achieved everything in their life, much more than anybody else? Name, fame, money, success, luxury, everything. And yet, why do they commit suicide? Is it because they're not ideal characters? Yes, suicide can happen to anyone. Suicide happens to most educated people. Scientists commit suicide. Scientists commit suicide. Film stars commit suicide. Intellectuals commit suicide. Writers, the poets, the painters commit suicide. Especially the people who are very sensitive at heart. And they can be a genius, and yet they might become a victim. They might become so vulnerable at a time that, yes, there is a moment comes in almost everybody's life. There's no exception to this point, that in everybody's life, there are moments when you feel like committing suicide. Ask any husband, ask any wife, if they haven't had a moment in their life when they wanted to commit suicide. They can. And they're educated people. They're responsible people. They're having a family, they're having a good life. And yet, it is inescapable in life that nobody will have ever a moment when he or she tries to commit suicide. So this is something which is really part of our life. We can't help it. It's there.
Would anyone else like to come in at this point with a comment about the film, about the discussion so far?
Yeah,
Geeta. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, this discussion is really getting very interesting. So I thought I should intervene at this point, particularly at the, when we are discussing the topic of death. For me, like, the film begins with death and ends with death. In different forms, even in between, there is a presence of death. So we obviously know about the beginning, and in the middle, of course, there is also one conversation between Nandu and Sushma, where Nandu says that he feels that he particularly wants the inside man to die. It's like the conscience, he wants to suppress that conscience. He's already feeling that moment. And in the end, this is death, whether we call it suicide or not, or whether we call it the question of right to die or voluntary death, whatever we call it. But I think there is nothing wrong in even calling it suicide. And I agree completely with what the writer Kamlesh Pandey was saying. That and I find it very original. I must say that the end is very original. Is one of the most original endings, I would say, in any film, because suicide is not shown here as a sociological or psychiatric problem. There is one scene when we see this Indu when she is looking at fan. So I thought, my first feeling was probably, she wants to commit suicide. But I also thought later on that she comes from a small town or village where she might not have seen a fan, electricity fan. So whatever may be the reason, but the idea of death came to me as a viewer. But she doesn't commit suicide. She is supposedly a person who is suffering from mental illness, quote unquote. Because that's the time where we are also discussing, this film was, I think, released in 1985. And in 1979, 1983, there were several interviews with Foucault where he talks about suicide. And interestingly, he says that why do we always have to pathologize? We always have to present suicide as a psychiatric, as a psychiatric analysis. So he talks about the aestheticization of voluntary death, where suicide is not a mark of pathology, but as a form of resistance. So here, what Sushma says is very interesting. She makes this point that this suicide, whether we call it a suicide or voluntary death, is still a mark of resistance, because she has not been allowed to say as a living person or do as a living person. So she is doing it with her death. And why I call it very original, this ending, because in many films you would see that the problem when there are two girls and there is one boy, one hero and two heroines, and then this resolve this problem by killing one character in an accident or something which is like purely what we call deus ex machina. This is something which is coming outside the plot, not from within the plot. But this is something is from within the plot, because it's a like existential choice. That is her choice. She wants to die. She wants to make a statement through her death. And these are the points which have already been raised in different ways, like Gita used this term existential also. So I see it as a, like, even the guilt feeling, you see that when Nandu chooses to marry Indu, it is his choice. Sooner or later, he realizes this and there is a guilt feeling because of that. It is not that, simply he's following the faith, blind faith of his father, and he believes in astrology and he follows that so that he can be exempted, he can be absolved from his crime, okay, quote unquote. But I still raise this, okay, having said that, it's a very original ending and I like that. I felt, and most of the viewers and those who are present here, I think they were trying to say in certain way, I don't know whether we can use this term, but I'm just raising this question, can we call it marital rape when Nandu tries to, or he does actually have sexual relation with his wife, and he has already said that he wants to sow the seeds of hatred in the body of Indu, to take, like he says that will finally lead to the death of Indu, and so I particularly looked at that scene as a kind of marital rape. I don't know whether people agree here with this or not. That's all. Thank you very much. Overall, it's a wonderful film. I agree, it's a wonderful film.
Thank you, Sanjay. Any more comments? Tarkeshwar, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to come in on what Sanjay just referred to as rape and marital rape. I think this issue has been raised even in earlier chart and also in Facebook discussion. And somebody quoted the law also. And if we consider her as quote unquote mentally retarded and having intercourse with a mentally retarded person is rape, then legally it is rape. But the question is, she also has a desire. She expresses that. I want him to touch. While speaking to her mother-in-law, she expresses it. So in that sense, there is a desire. And if there is a desire in her, leaving aside this legal issue of she being mentally retarded, how will it be rape? That is number one. And the second question is it a crime to have a desire for a mentally retarded person is another question I think that will crop up here. Yes, I do agree that it amounts to, if not rape, murder. When you know that she is going to die, if you have intercourse and if she gets pregnant and while delivering the child, she might die. There is a culpable homicide, not murder as such, culpable homicide legally. In that sense, that's why people have spoken about this particular character as a villain in that sense. But I don't think rape could be an appropriate term there. And though our mother-in-law has warned her that if she has intercourse with him or if he sleeps with her, then he will die. So there is a fear that has been put in her mind. But the desire is such that she overcomes even that fear that he might die, who is treating her as Radha now. So in that sense, this film is also about the desire. And this desire to die, to fulfill the desire, they are ready to die too. Even the other character, Sushma, she also wants to get united with him, even if it amounts to dying after 9 months or 10 months. So in that sense, this film is also about a desire. Again, if you look at the Nandu's character as villain, but as Kamlesh Pandey said, he also has a desire to live with Sushma. In order to live with her, he is ready to make somebody else a scapegoat. So in that sense, this is also a film about this desire to be with somebody whom you like, whom you love. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarkeshwar, for bringing up this question of desire. Any other?
Ma'am, may I?
Yes, Nikita.
Yes, I have a question with Kamal sir. Sir, as you said that it's a movie of common men, not of ideal people. So, but obviously movies have impact on the audience, especially if we see Hindi cinema had always influenced the Indian society. So I want to know that whether your film and you whether your story attempted to change the definition of hero by portraying a vulnerable men on screen at the same time as spineless men, or not only ANKAHEE but other movies of Amol Palekar sir, they break the binaries of hero versus villain, or do they change the definition of hero?
Actually, he has left the discussion, Nikita.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, fine, ma'am.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions?
Ajanta has raised her hand.
Yes, Ajanta, please go ahead.
Yeah, Geeta, thanks very much. And so I wanted to comment on this earlier comment. One, I was also both of Professor Sanjay and Tarkeshwar. I was also clearly reminded of Foucault, and clearly suicide is not a pathology. And maybe, because we are thinking of it through critical theory, we're looking at the film differently. But also, given that this woman, this coding as retarded is extremely problematic for me. So what are the terms on which she's giving consent? So within psychiatric practice, there's such a stringent code that is, of course, broken as a rule rather than followed. So the question of consent is a very, very sort of loaded one. And clearly, this woman, when she expresses desire, that has to be unpacked at several levels. And to the question that was raised earlier, and which is what I was trying to ask before he abruptly left. So I think clearly he was trying to say that this has some kind of a didactic kind of message, right? They're positioning themselves against the so-called mainstream and the so-called, sort of characters that they feel are unrealistic, and in some ways, whatever, enlightenment as mass deception kind of position. And and I don't know, perhaps that's what I'm trying to ask also, that this idea of blind faith, or I really don't know what so one, I found the film deeply troubling at several levels, So it's the woman who is the most rational, who's able to stand up to reason, who cannot tell, and her attraction to this man who's completely spineless. And that I found really sort of, deeply sort of unable to explain to myself. And if she was so guilt-ridden, why didn't she just tell the woman who was so vulnerable? And and to a point that was made earlier also, why can't she just get ahead in life? So why did she have to kill herself at the end? So it was a very deeply troubling film, and to that extent, very, very complex. And I'm just wondering if anybody had similar thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Ajanta. Yeah, with regard to mental illness, you're absolutely right. The film has a very regressive take on mental illness, with the doctor suggesting sex as therapeutic for a hysterical woman, and characterizing her illness as hysteria is also something deeply problematic. So you're absolutely right when you say that the whole dealing with mental illness in this film is a bit problematic.
I think, Geeta, that there is a very thin line in the film between dealing with the formation of the brain. I think I was trying to point this out in the earlier part of the discussion, and also about the psychological approach. I think there are two very different areas, actually, if you look at it. Because when we are dealing with Indumati's character, it is more to do with how she is dealt with. She actually has a personality deficit. We must not forget it. Because she is repeatedly scolded by her father, Chal Pagli and all that thing, repeatedly in the film. Okay, it is as if she's being shut out. Okay, which causes the deficit. She's afraid of sound. She's afraid of music, unless if it is very harsh. Okay, and then on the counter to it, the solution which is given is that if this woman is able to marry, then I think the word which comes through is wo khil uthegi. Okay, therein lies the problematic of the matter. I think the problem is over there, that we are not differentiating in the movie a psychological approach.
You muted yourself.
You have muted yourself, Soumitra. Soumitra, you have muted yourself. You're not audible.
There is a problem regarding how we are looking at this time. She has a personality deficit. No, I think that it's okay. I've joined from my mobile.
Yeah, I think there's a problem with his connection.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
The video was disturbed. I think that there are two separate, as I was saying, there are two separate things. One is the psychological approach, which she has because she suffers from a personality deficit. Okay, which actually stems from the fact that she's given no confidence by her father. Okay, who shouts at her at every sort of thing. Okay, and then the solution which is found out is that let the girl get married, then she will bloom like a flower. Wo khil uthegi. That is what the psychoanalyst says. I think therein lies the problem in this movie when we are dealing with Indumati's character. That is not very well chalked out in this movie. I felt so.
Yeah. Ivy has raised her hand. Please go ahead, Ivy. Ivy.
Let me unmute myself. Yes.
Yeah,
Hi.
sure.
Hi. Yes. There is one sentence statement made by Sushma which is not explored further. This is the caste angle. She says in the beginning, she tells her that man, the father-in-law, the person who's supposed to be a father-in-law, her boyfriend's father, that I know that you don't like me because we belong to a different caste. I belong to a different caste. So this later on was not explored. We are not told anything about what caste she belongs to, but we get a general idea that the family that she's hoping to marry into is a very orthodox kind of a family. Could be a Brahmin family, possibly, but very orthodox. And is it possible that the astrologer also might have resisted her this marriage by making this terrible prediction about her? So this is one angle that could have been explored. Okay. Yes, so that is something which I thought, and also maybe at the end when she's rejected by her the person she loves, then could this also have, in some way, led her to a much, bigger, that depression, that kind of mental state that she went into, that she finally decided to commit suicide. I mean, why did she have to commit suicide? This is also something which I find very strange. I mean, people do get rejections all the time in love. So she could have gone ahead and done something else with her life, got married to another person. Yes. So why did she have to? So I think there are other things that are, left, slightly, unexplored. And that's my comment. I don't know if it's a question.
I think the point about her suicide that was emphasized in the discussion was the fact that it was not due to any depression or not due to disappointment in love, but it was an act of choice.
It was an act of choice, and she has
Yes.
bayan deti hu.
Yes, it was an act of choice. So I think that's how the narrative was framed.
Yeah, but even then to have killed herself, this is again something I, even though she might have made this statement at the end, and of course, in the original play, the story where the original story, it was different. She does die, but it's not given as a bayan. But in the film, the script writer himself said that we had to show it in such a way that it would not be seen as legitimizing suicide. So therefore, he wrote it as a bayan. Okay. Yeah. So therefore, I think in the original, if we go to the original, maybe it was more, the result of depression, perhaps.
I haven't read the play, so I wouldn't know.
Yes.
And any other comments?
In this caste angle,
yeah,
or the difference in terms of the community is suppressed by the narrative. I think it might have been there even in the play, as even I have not read the play, but it was common for the films in 70s and 80s to underplay the question of caste. So here too, there are certain questions that will come up, even in terms of this prediction itself. The prediction is based on the horoscope of Nandu. So we don't know whether the horoscope of the woman also says the same thing. That is another interesting thing. And whether the prediction is based on comparing the compatibility of the two horoscopes in terms of marriage. So if these two marry and then produce a kid, what happens? So in that sense, there are questions about it. But I think the question is not about whether the prediction is right or wrong. As Kamlesh Pandey was saying, the play itself is in the dialogue between astrology and astronomy. So in that sense, to project that, the narrative underplays certain aspects and projects certain aspects. So in that sense, if you start comparing the narrative with the quote-unquote real-life situations as we know, then you might pick up a lot of holes in any kind of narrative. Because the reality that we know and the reality that the narrative constructs could be always two different things. So in that sense, these things do exist there, in that sense, it is not making a kind of a realistic climb as such. So, so that kind of willing suspension of disbelief, I think we need to undergo while watching the movie. But I think though it looks like a dialogue between the two positions, but the narrative at the end in the on screen has come out as very complex. As we know that the kind of discussion that it has generated in the last 1.5 to 2 hours, the narrative is much more complex than what it intended to serve as, either as a play or as the movie. Thank you for suggesting this movie and for the discussion.
Thank you, Tarkeshwar. Any more comments? Okay, in that case.
Madhurima has unmuted.
Okay, yes, Madhurima, please.
Yeah, I just had one thing to say that has already been discussed mostly. So the film deals with this dialectic between the scientific temper and, if we can say, our superstitious belief. But in those scenes where this Hindu is being regarded as mentally retarded by a medical professional, and how the film goes on to justify this because just after the act, it is shown that Hindu suddenly grows mentally mature, and the film goes on to justify this representation. So that somehow destabilizes the film's take on science, according to me. And the other point that I was trying to say is that we are talking about the love or the desire aspect in the film from the perspective of Nandu. To me, it felt more like Nandu is with the idea of loving himself, because when he wanted to live with Shishma, and that is why he married Indu, that was more like it was he who could not have lived without Shishma. And in the end, when he understood that he cannot get Shishma, then he falls in love with Indu. Now it becomes like he has no life without Indu. So his idea of love is very interesting as well as problematic in the movie. And the movie overall is quite interesting towards. So thank you for suggesting the movie.
Thank you, Madhurima. Any more comments, or shall we call it a day? Yeah, the fact that it has gone on till almost 11 p.m. shows that it has indeed been an interesting, stimulating discussion. Thank you all very much. And I would like to place on record TFO's gratitude to Rekha Nigam, screenwriter in Hindi cinema, for putting us through to Amol Palekar as well as Kamlesh Pandey. Thank you, Rekha. And thank you all very much for joining in. Good night and have a nice Sunday. Thank you so much, Soumitra Roy, once again for being here despite your bereavement. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To Amol Palekar. Yeah. Thanks to
Amol Palekar as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining. Those who have joined us today, please continue to join us. Every week we meet on Saturday at 9 p.m.
Yeah. Okay.
Good night.
Good night. Have a nice Sunday. Bye. Women's
Geeta, please unmute yourself. Geeta, please unmute yourself.
Oh, okay. Should I continue? Was I?
Yeah, just for a moment, you can continue.
Okay, yeah. We have also held retrospectives of Kelly Reichardt